what would be the first hire? What would be your first hire? What would you, as a business owner, what would you get out of first? And what would you say the answer to that is?
So there's two. Well, we know what the answer is. I know you. We both know what the answer is, but we'll tee it up slightly more before we tell
the person
people.
that makes the tea.
Reasons.
You need the tea maker.
That's true. Yeah, essential. It's the lifeblood of any e-commerce business is to have an in-house tea making person with a trolley to come round,
dunking biscuits,
to know what biscuits you
selection.
need. What tea bags?
Yeah.
No,
true. It's not.
No, it's not. So the answer often is that if you are an e-commerce business, what you'll keep hold of is customer support. Yeah. You'll keep hold of customer services more than probably anything else.
Hello, Ian. How are you? Another fine
Good evening, my brother. How are you?
Yeah, a little bit earlier this week than last week when we talked for thousands of hours about benchmarking and then came up with nothing. I think we came up with something in the end. Yeah, but
by the time that we got it, I was so tired at the end that I gave up listening to you. Drifted off.
Well, you were driving, so hopefully you got home safe. Obviously you did. Yeah. Anyway, so we're going to talk about e-commerce teams today. And we're going to talk about the pitfalls, the opportunities, the efficiencies in teams, maybe some tools, how to hire, when to hire, all the jazz about hiring an e-commerce team. Because, to be honest, I don't know anybody that talks about it. I haven't heard anybody talk about it. And when and how big. And I think if nobody talks about it, what tends to happen is you have the team you feel you need is right at the right time based on what it feels like to be at a certain level of business. Yeah, which is why quite a lot of people get it wrong. So do you want to tee this up?
Yeah. So my perspective is, okay, so obviously we're trying to grow an e-commerce business ultimately for profit. And how do you know at what stage you should be recruiting? Because if you don't recruit a team, you're eventually going to get stuck because you become a bottleneck. And so what we don't want to have is a bottleneck, which can very quickly become you if you're the owner and you're running the e-commerce brand. On the flip side of it, what we don't want to do is add in too much cost too soon. Because obviously if we add too much cost too soon, your fixed costs go up because you're hiring people that you shouldn't hire. And your fixed costs go up, which means it becomes really hard to make a profit. And on the extremeness of this opens up the question around what should the fixed cost be as a percentage of revenue, which is a sort of precursor to, can you hire? Are you ready? Are you at the point yet? And yes, you need to have a shell to grow into. So you've got to be thinking ahead, but you've got to really know roughly at what stage. And so the extreme example. So I was having a chat with an e-com brand today, and this is a brand that's quite well known. I won't say who it is because they went into administration at the end of lockdown, and they went into administration at the end of lockdown because they got into a mess with their fixed costs, and they've invested heavily in thinking that their production was going to continue, the volume was going to continue, and but they went so big so fast, and then when the market softened, their fixed costs were so high that they just couldn't afford to trade. They just ran out of money. And the extreme example, they went from they did a 5 times. So one of the questions we'll often ask. Sorry, I'm drifting slightly, Mark, but I'm going to come back to the question about staff. But one of the questions we often ask around is, could you double revenue now at the same fixed costs? And most people say, yeah, pretty much. Let's say I'm doing 2 million. Could you do 4 million with the same fixed costs? And he said, well, yeah, I'd have to tweak this and tweak that. Maybe you get another person, but roughly, generally, my fixed costs aren't going to double. This business went from doing 10 million to having a capacity of 50 million. And so when they didn't get that same growth, they're now in the position where they've rebought themselves out of administration, and they're actually in a position where they're doing probably about 6 or 7 million, with still the capacity of doing 50 million. And so clearly their fixed costs are too high, and they can't do anything about it. So it's a really challenging situation. So essentially, that's an extreme example, but you've got to know roughly where your fixed costs need to be. And the reason why is it becomes so difficult if you're carrying such a high level of fixed costs. And I'll go back another little story. We've been in e-commerce now for 25 years. And for the first, I'm going to say 20 years of our career, we really didn't talk too much about profits in the business. That we mentored thousands, but we didn't talk too much about profit, and nor did we really think about what was the perfect fixed cost ratio, what was the perfect margin, what was the perfect variable cost, and the reason is that generally everybody was growing. The businesses that we're working with, generally this feeling, this emotional feeling that we're growing, and therefore we'll worry about profit at some point. And but as long as we're growing, it's all going to be okay. And then I think it's been, like we've said a few times, lots of conversation recently about profit, because everybody's now become, we've had COVID, there's a cost of living crisis supposedly, and we're talking about profit. And so we're talking about.
I don't think you can say
costs.
Supposedly. I think there is a cost of living crisis.
Well, it depends when people are listening. I mean, some would say it affects others more than others.
I think if you're one in America, oil sheik, you might be all right. Yeah.
But is there a cost of living crisis in America? Compared to.
I think it's everywhere. It's everywhere, and it's just inflation. Anyway, let's not get into the cost of living crisis, because there's many other podcasts covering that.
What I'm saying is that your decision about when to hire is a really important one, because it affects your profitability. And obviously you need to hire the right people at the right time. And if you hire too many people at the wrong time and you get it wrong, obviously you can potentially be really holding your business back. In the same vein, you've got to know when to go. So that's the precursor of it, is to make sure that you're being aware of what your fixed costs. So let's go to the second point we've just written down before you go.
Which is the second point?
Which is what is the typical fixed cost percentage of an e-commerce? What do we like to see on average in a business?
That's where I was going to go.
That's right. I thought you might go way ahead and miss that point.
No, I was like, you've got to tell them that key metric. I think fixed costs as a ratio of revenue, like 15% is probably kind of where you want to be max. Like, the thing is, a lot of people listening to that, they'll work out their fixed costs as a percentage. It might be higher than that, because usually, let's say you're doing like 20 million. 20 million, most of those businesses tend to have a fixed cost ratio of like 10 to 15%. And I understand that that's at scale. That's fine. That's a lot of fixed costs. That's a lot of staff at that level. But when you're only doing 1 million, 10% fixed costs is actually quite low if you think about it, the things you've got to organize and you've got to do. So it becomes harder to have that as a low fixed cost. But if you get your fixed cost ratio to revenue like up to 25, 30, 35, it's really going to kill your growth, really going to hamper what you can do, unless you are backed by somebody else, and you are backed by someone who's got like, hey, here's some money, just go and grow, that kind of side of things. If you are bootstrapping it yourself, it's going to be difficult. And I think
the reason, sorry to interject you annoyingly. But the reason that a 35% fixed cost ratio, so you're doing £1 million and you're saying 35% of that, 350,000 is your fixed cost. The reason why that's so difficult is because in order to make any profit, your fixed costs have been spread over a small number of orders. So obviously, as you get bigger, your fixed costs don't double. So you can often double revenue, but your fixed costs don't double. So if in that scenario, you have a business that goes from 1 million to 2 million, and the fixed costs stay at 350,000, you've halved. So at the 2 million, your fixed costs are like 15%, 16% rather than 35%. So it means you're much more profitable. So you're trying to get to that point where, if the super efficient businesses are the ones where the fixed costs are like 5%, and that's when you become much more profitable because you've got this volume gain. But in order to get there, you have to understand, how to scale it.
Yeah. So I think you've got to look at you've got to understand where you are, because I think otherwise, you see, it was when I was working somewhere in an office, and there was a lady who became a manager. She was promoted and she became a manager, and she went out and bought herself a car. And I was like thinking, why have you bought yourself a car? And it's because she said, well, I'm a manager now. I should have manager things. And it's like, well, I knew how much she was getting paid. I was like, you're not getting paid enough to afford that kind of car. It was just basically how she felt her lifestyle would be when she became promoted to a manager. And I think that's the same thing with e-commerce. You can go, oh, I'm doing 2 million, therefore I should have this many staff. And it's like, it doesn't really work like that, because it depends on your variable costs and your profit ratios and all those kind of things within the business to dictate what it is. But a ratio of fixed costs is a good idea, a good guide to see where you are. So
can I say, sorry to say one thing, but it's funny enough, it's happening in some of the brands that we run. So some of the brands that we co-own with, we're investors in the businesses, and occasionally we'll go into one of the e-commerce brands that we're running, and we'll talk to the other main investor who often is running the day-to-day operations, and we'll go, right, what's going on? And so, I've just hired somebody, and we're like, what? Who have you hired? Well, I've hired this person. What are they going to do? Well, they're just going to look at competitors, and they're going to do some market analysis, and they're going to do a little bit of photography. And we're like, what are you doing? Is there enough work for this? And it's like, well, why have you done that? Well, I just felt like, we want to grow. We need more people. We need, all I hear on people's podcasts is, you've got to get good people around you. That's what everybody says. You've got to get a good team. You can't do it all on your own. And obviously that's true. But also, there's got to be a sense check of logic around this, hasn't there? Because obviously, technically, your salary costs, is really eating away at your profits. So, it's not only the salary you've got to pay for, you've got to pay for the multiple effect. It's the same as a return on ad spend. You might have to multiply that by 3 to be able to
It's
do
definitely
it. So
the middle of the road. The middle of the road, though, isn't it? So I think we've probably been banging on about taking on too much cost, but at the same time, like if you go too far the other way, you'll be doing everything yourself and you won't grow. So it's definitely in the middle of the road. And I think that you've got to force yourself to take on people when it's the right time. So let's come on to... Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the team members. And then I was going to ask you the question is, what team member would you hire first? Yeah. So I'll just go through the kind of normal team members. And so like in a kind of big e-commerce business that has a big eternal team, you'll have an operations manager, customer service representatives, marketing specialists, product managers and procurement managers, and then you'd have IT support developers. So that's kind of like the overall stack of people in a business.
And I'll just say one thing is when you're on your, like you may be doing all of those things, and you may have, or there may be
you're wearing all those hats.
You'll be wearing all those hats. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's correct.
Yeah.
In lots of cases, depending on the size and aspirations of the business, of course.
Well, I think like it's in any business, if you hire someone to do a job, it's very important that you've done that job before. because if you haven't done that job and you don't know that job and you'll bring it internally, let's say the difficulty is like people do Google Ads, for example, and they have an agency to manage it and then they bring it in-house, but they've never managed it and they don't know. So therefore it becomes very difficult to manage that person doing Google Ads because they've got no knowledge of that thing. So that becomes difficult to know whether that person's doing a good job or not.
Yeah,
so
I'd say you do hear different advice to this question, though. Is should you do all the roles yourself? And that's a difficult one because it depends on what it is. What should you be doing? Development work yourself, IT support. If your talent is not that. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule, but I think you're saying
no.
I think particularly with what we see a lot is that e-commerce brands will outsource maybe their paid media very quickly, their Google or their Meta ads very, very, very quickly, and often that can be so critical to the success of the business that we're saying really you've got to understand how that works, at least so that you could quiz and question the agency correctly. But whether or not you've got to do all of these roles yourself, I mean, we're a bit like that because we love the mechanics of it all. But would you advise? I'm not sure I would advise everybody that does that to do that.
No, I to be honest, like a lot of I can't think of anyone we work with who has internalized all those roles. Like, there's not one that has got everything in-house. So I think it's like a smorgasbord of things, and you take control over the things that you are good at, and then you outsource the other stuff that you aren't. And particularly like paid media, if you're getting up to really big spends, there are specialists out there who are always going to be better than an internal team, just because when you get to massive spends, you need a specialist in massive spends, and those are the people that maybe manage 4 accounts that spend $1 million a month. There's not many people in the world who manage those size of accounts, and you're not good to hire someone who has an experience of managing $1 million a month account. They're very rare and very, very expensive. So that it really depends on horses for courses and on the level of growth you're at. And the same with development. Like, are you going to have enough jobs for an internal development if you're on Shopify to come and change the homepage of the site or the structure of the product page? Like, you might do it once every 6 months.
Yeah,
it's not.
And you're
not going to have all those roles.
It's a really good point because on that topic, and I was chatting to somebody the other day who has been in e-commerce like the same sort of time as us, and we were laughing because we were saying that the people who are coming into e-commerce now in 2024 for the first time have no idea how hard it used to be 20 years ago when you're trying to, build a website, for example. I mean, it could take you a year.
Yeah, so kind of growing the business and growing the size is going to depend on what you're good at and what you're not good at. And I think that the danger is taking on too much fixed costs, which we talked about, but the danger is also not taking on the right people at the right time. So I've got an answer to this. What would be the first hire? What would be your first hire? What would you, as a business owner, what would you get out of first? And what would you say the answer to that is?
So there's two. Well, we know what the answer is. I know you. We both know what the answer is, but we'll tee it up slightly more before we tell people.
It's the person
there's two
that makes
reasons.
the tea.
Yeah,
so you need the tea maker.
That's true. Yeah, essential. It's the lifeblood of any e-commerce business is to have an in-house tea making
full time
with a trolley to come round full time,
dunking biscuits,
to know what biscuits you need,
selection,
what tea.
Yeah,
that's true.
No,
so,
it's not.
No, it's not. So the answer often is that if you are an e-commerce business, what you'll keep hold of is customer support.
Yeah.
You'll keep hold of customer services more than probably anything else. And do you know the other thing? It will really pee you off.
Yeah,
it'll really annoy you because you'll get really emotional about people leaving a bad review and it'll really start to grind on you. And so it's essentially, you have to start to protect yourself from the customers. And that seems a weird thing, because if you listen to all your customers, you'd literally go insane, because it would drive you batty, really piss you off. So you have to, A, protect yourself, and secondly, you have to get over the worry that our customers are always different. Like, oh, no, we can't outsource our customer service elements because ours are different. Our customers won't like that. They're different. Guess what? Everybody says that.
Yeah.
Everybody says their customers are different to everybody's. You say, no, we can't outsource. And honestly, that's one of the first areas. Emotionally, you've got to protect yourself. You've got to protect your emotional energy, because guess what? When you're growing a business, it takes so much energy and passion and drive and determination. You've got to you get knocked back down, you got to get back up. So you have to take away these things. So that's the first thing I would be looking to get support with, would be my frontline customer service.
Yeah. And the other thing I hear a lot is, which is kind of what you alluded to, is, I could never train someone up on my customer service. It's too complicated. No one would be able, it would take me a year, 2 years to do this. And it's like, that has never turned out to be true. So there's like a lady we're working with in Australia. She said that to me, and it's very complicated stuff around like particular kind of things for house and like fittings and things like that. And she's completely revolutionized her business in it took her about 3 months. And she literally was able to triple the revenue because it was all about customer emails coming in. And she was literally able to triple the revenue by taking on VAs and training them up. And even if you've got a very complicated product, there will be that 80-20 rule. Like 80% of those queries will be answerable by someone who's trained up, and 20% won't. And even if you get rid of those 80%, you're going to massively fast forward what you do. And the thing is, like why would you have a business like that you can't go away from, and you're sitting there in Spain on the beach and you're replying to customer support stuff? Like when, it's probably $600 a month, like at the beginning for a full-time VA to kind of start managing stuff. Even a part-time one, you could say, well, you just do it these days or something like that. Like, I don't think this, life's too short to kind of like be addicted to that fight where you have to do everything. And like, that is the first thing you've got to get out of, because like you say, otherwise you will dictate your customer policies by David, the annoying customer who always moans about certain things. And like he becomes the dictation of what happens and what policies and what messages you have on your website and all that kind of stuff. And it's not about Dave. It's about the wider market that you're growing to. And so
it's about everybody that bought generally.
Yeah.
You know, and if moaning Dave has a disproportionately loud voice in your head, and he starts to influence you when he shouldn't. He really shouldn't be. And there's something else as well. I mean, we've been guilty of this. In fact, we chatted about this the other night, and we were talking about being a busy fool. And I was saying, you know, I used to, you know, early in my career, I think nothing of driving 4 hours across the country to have a meeting for an hour and then drive back 4 hours. And I go, oh, that was a great day. That was really good.
I was busy.
Like, what?
Yeah, I was busy. I was fighting the fight.
I was doing this. Yeah. And I was going, I did it. And he went, they had a great meeting. It was intense, you know. And then you drive back and you're like, oh my God. And actually, there's an element of doing this for your customer service. You know, if you're chasing around for Dave, you know, who wants to know where his order is, and you satisfy Dave, and you spend the whole day doing this, you've not actually driven the business forward. You've just resolved some problems that aren't actually, you know, vital to the success of the company. And it's very easy to fall into that trap of being a busy fool and satisfying that need. And some people need to be needed. You know, I've had that criticism given to me, that I need to be needed. And so
you do have a tendency. Oh my God! You do have a tendency to take a scalable product and turn it into a completely unscalable product by putting yourself right in the middle of it. It's just a trait you may have done a few times. Yeah. Tell you what, What we'll do, instead of doing this, what I'll do is I will turn up personally and stay there for 4 hours and do this for everybody. Yeah. So
it's great to have the support of your family, isn't it? You know, you to have a fun family that believes in you and that makes you feel really good about yourself. Honestly, you won't hear me criticizing Mark on the podcast, will you?
No, because I get to edit it.
Without me, you'd be nothing.
Just to be honest, just edits it out.
I've dragged you into this.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Ian, you've frozen.
Yeah,
again.
I don't know what you're saying. Yeah.
What a shame.
Okay, so the next question would be, what would be the next hire, which is slightly different and it's slightly not as obvious. I'll give you my answer. So the next hire for me...
Yeah, because I don't know what you're going to say.
For me would be email, because email is always one of those things. It's not necessarily a hire, but it's something I'd want to get off my shoulders, because what tended to happen when I was running e-commerce businesses a long time ago was that I'd rock up to the week and I'd go, I've got to get an email out. What the hell am I going to do? Oh, blah, blah, blah. And I'd just and then it would be like, oh God, what am I going to do this week? Whereas actually,
and you don't do it.
Email for many of the e-commerce businesses I've run has been like the lifeblood of it. And it's stupid. It's like you either go and pick up that revenue or you don't. And it's like, because I'm so busy with everything else, I'm not doing it. So like having email, if you haven't got it organized, like someone to help organize it or do something to get some emails out more regularly with better content and better thought around it is probably one of the good things to do. I mean, obviously some e-commerce businesses aren't email led as much and it's more flow based. You know, like the pre-purchase businesses where it's all about one purchase, you know, and it's all about pre-purchase. A lot of that can be flow, like, not flows and things can do that. But like email's still a big time suck. So that's probably where I go. And then if it wasn't email, it'd probably be like if you've got like an organic content business, like on Instagram and stuff like that getting help with that, because that's again an area I'm talking about home decor sites and things like that. They tend to underdo that side of stuff because if the founder's in charge of that, the founder will get pulled off into a crisis, and then there won't be anything going on to Instagram for the next 2 months, and then the Facebook ads will die and the Instagram ads will die because there's nothing. You know, it's basically, you know, a business owner is always spinning plates, and like if you're spinning these two plates, then these start wobbling. And it's like, well, in any e-commerce business, there's some plates that are really important to spin, even when you get pulled off into something. And I think obviously you can't not do customer support, and you can't not do your thing that drives the revenue. So those are the kind of the areas that I'd look at doing next. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I definitely think. I mean, I'll just go back to the customer service one, and the reason also is because it hits you over the head when you're not expecting it. You cannot predict when a customer's going to kick off, or there's going to be a problem, and that always tends to become, when you're early on in your busy career, you'll be like, oh, everything's fine, I'm okay, and then all of a sudden, like someone will just bulldoze the bloody wall down, and that's what your customers do to you. So you can't really, you've got to try and shield yourself.
Or supply. I mean, you could get a container gets stuck somewhere, and then you've got no stock, and then you've got to go and sort it out. There's all these things that can kind of blow up in your face, and you need your team to help you to carry on with customer support, particularly in those moments. It completely depends on what your skill set is. But I think the customer service one is a unanimous one across all businesses. That tends to be the one that we would get rid of first. For your own sanity, oh my God, don't do it. It's ridiculous, because you have so much more free time and energy and passion to do the things that you should be doing. And if that is going on Instagram and doing Instagram lives, or better, Facebook, interactions, go and run your Facebook group, go and do all those things, go and do the things that only you can do, or go and start to think about, working with your suppliers more to make the products better. I mean, it all depends, but generally, you take away the things that you don't need to do,
and that you don't enjoy doing. And you might say you enjoy talking to customers. Great, you will do. The ones that are lovely, yes. But the ones that are not, and there's just some really difficult people to deal with. People aren't rational.
No.
You know, there's some difficult customers then. I mean, we've had reviews on some of our brands that people didn't even place the bloody order. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, we can't find your order. You didn't place it.
They're like, I don't like these patent pillowcases. They're absolutely ridiculous. And when I tried to return them, they wouldn't let me return them. And it's like, we don't sell patent pillowcases. We only sell white ones. You please return them to the shop you got them from. Honestly.
But we still got the bad review. Yeah. Didn't take it off.
No, it's insane.
So
like things like procurement, like you have to be careful with that, because sometimes like at the top level, that's a real skill, but you can outsource like those repeat orders. Like you've got a lot of businesses that like have the same, like when you can have drum buffer rope kind of things. Like if stock gets down to a certain low, you just go to this supplier and you just order it. You can say, you can give those procurement tasks to someone and say, as long as the order is lower than, I don't know, $4,000 or something like that, you are able to do the procurement, and you just go and fill these up if the stock goes down to this level. It's very much more difficult to outsource the high level procurement. Like only a business manager a business owner can probably bring in a new range a lot of the time until you're really big and you've got someone that's skilled, because it takes the balls to kind of have the thing to say, I'm going to go and test this new range and I'm going to go and invest in this new range. And like juniors can't do that. They can't go out and say, oh, well, I'm going to go and go and do lighting for the first time, and that's going to be like 500 grand. It's just not something you can outsource.
You know what? I think most people who've listened to this, the strength that the owner of the brand has is that they understand the customers. They understand the customers better than anybody, and they understand the products better than anybody. You know, that need of why people buy these products and what the customers emotionally feel like. And that's probably the most powerful thing to exploit, that you understand the customer's needs better than anybody. And so you've got to work in that area. And that is probably the products, owning the products.
Yeah.
And understanding, how you portray them, and what the photography shoot should be like, and what the positioning should be like. And how that works. I'm working with your suppliers as well to try to increase your margin and actually to understand what your suppliers are doing. And that's where I would be. I mean, whenever I've been to our suppliers and some of our brands, I've been blown away with the knowledge that I've come back with, because they're so in that world and they're making stuff for lots of people all over the place. And they say, right, this is all the products like for bedding. The American market's slightly further ahead, and they were much more into the organic side of it, and the recycledness and the packaging, and and in terms of not having plastic in the packaging, they're way ahead than the UK. So this is all coming, and they give you that knowledge. So that's where I would go as an owner. I would be looking at what the customers wanted, what's trending, what the suppliers are doing. How can we make sure we're ahead? I mean, it depends on what you're, of course, selling, but no one else can do that, really, can they?
No,
you can't really outsource
to be honest, that is the best market research you can do. And it's like for example, when I did my son's business, I was talking to the printers, and I knew the printers who were printing all the print-on-demand stuff for the whole of I won't say which country it was, but it was a big country. And I was like, well, what are you printing the most? Oh, we said we're printing this the most, and we're printing this the most, and we're printing this the most. And it's like, well, Ben, why don't you do one of those businesses? I didn't go and just let him randomly pick one. I said, look, these are some ideas, and these are doing well at the moment, and this is what we're doing. So if you ring up, like if you actually go to the factory and you're spending time with them and you walk around on a factory tour, you can say, what's that?
Yeah.
What's that being made? Where's that going? Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. You seem to have loads of piles of that. What is that? Oh, that's the new organic sheets. And
how are they selling it? Yeah. What channels are they using, and what colors are popular? And is it seasonal? is that color and that pattern, really popular? So
how much did you do last year?
So much.
Is it more than this year? Is it less?
Yeah.
Is it going down? Is it going up?
Are they growing?
You can't ring them up
increase their volume.
You can't ring them up
massively.
and ask them those questions. They're not going to tell you. So, I'd like to talk to you about your other customers and I'd like to find out how they're really doing. It's like, we can't disclose that. But if you're actually at the factory, they go, this is what we're making here and this is what we're doing here. This is like, it's a different world, isn't it? So...
And the trade shows as well. I mean, I know, on a tiny micro level, if you go to the trade shows, most industries have a trade show. And, it's amazing what the sales team will give you. You say, right, what's popular, what's trending, what's going on? And honestly, it's always been genuine. In my experience, whenever I've been to these, it's been very genuine, in terms of they're not trying to sell you something they think is trending. It genuinely tends to be. They have because they obviously know what future demand's coming, what orders have been coming in. I find it fascinating. And me as an owner, that's where I would spend my time.
Yeah.
So I think that the biggest asset that business owners have in e-commerce is that they understand the customer better than anybody else. And that's where they should be spending their time. Not in customer service departments, not in the development department. They should be spending the time understanding their customer, and that might be with the suppliers and the markets to understand, what's going on, what's trending, and that's the biggest asset. Is that their customer knowledge, their deep customer. They understand what the customers want more than anyone.
Yeah, and interestingly, the biggest e-commerce brands I've worked with, and I've seen them from the founder, from zero to hero. Was the founder had, and this particular one I'm thinking about, they had an insider knowledge of the market. They had a kind of insider knowledge, and whether that's visiting the supplier or like that. But in this case, this guy in New Zealand, there is Trade Me, and Trade Me is New Zealand's version of eBay. So he ran all the digital advertising on Google for Trade Me. And he had access to all the stats across the whole country about what was selling. And then he took that and left and created an e-commerce business. And he started selling, I think he was selling flat pack sheds and camera accessories. Like, it was really random products, if you think about it. And one of them took off massively, and it was flat pack sheds. And now that business is one of the biggest e-commerce businesses in New Zealand. And it's because it started with, it was kind of like an unfair advantage. He was doing nothing wrong. I mean, it was his job, and like he knew basically what was selling, and probably quite a few other people in Trade Me knew what was selling. But he was just able to start a business that was pretty much guaranteed to be successul, because he's like, well, these are the most popular products in New Zealand. I've got access to it. No one else has. And I'm going to go and sell those.
I think behind most big, really successful brands originally was a founder that truly understood what the customers wanted. I mean, look at Apple, and look at Steve Jobs. The one thing that he knew how to do was understand what the customers wanted before the customer even knew what they wanted. With the iPhone and the keyboard, and I think if you could distill what Steve Jobs was doing into like one thing, it was that deep understanding of the customer's needs. And he did that better than anything and anybody in the world at the time. And I think that was why Apple was so successful.
Yeah. They gave him what he wanted because you can't ask them what they want.
No.
You have to know. You have to know.
They just said, I want a faster horse. What was the,
Yeah, the Ford quote. Yeah,
Ford guy. Yeah.
Fast. And the Steve Jobs one, the people would have asked for a smaller phone. It was, remember that the phones were just becoming thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and smaller. And then he came out with this big phone, and it was like, what are you doing? Like, it's not what we want. Yeah. So, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's that insight as an owner you need to know, because that's ultimately where the market goes. And with the most talented team in the world, they can't fight against that. Like, look at like Nokia, and they had the best phones in the world with the best team and the most innovative people, and they were really passionate people. and it just died. And the same with BlackBerry. BlackBerry was the same. Like passionate teams, the most talented people, the most clever people.
Best marketing campaigns, the best media, the biggest budgets, the best data, the best KPIs, and none of that mattered because they didn't understand the customer enough. And I think where you get real, like the only place, in my opinion, that a brand in your industry is going to change is really from the founder and understanding what the customers need. In most cases, if you think about where you've really seen a company change direction and the brand's developed, I think it's because of the founder has got that deep passion of understanding what the customer needs. And I don't think it comes from anywhere else. You can't outsource that.
Well, it's like it's that big decision. It's the big ballsy decision to do it. It's like Nokia could have become Samsung. Like it could have just gone and copied the iPhone and become Samsung. Samsung just kind of basically copied the iPhone, created their version of it and did really well. But Nokia kind of just stayed with what they were doing, and nobody kind of went, look, that business is dead. You need to move to this new model straight away and create this type of phone. And like it's you kind of have that
the same.
Yeah. Kodak came.
Loads of examples. Yeah.
I mean, there's all these companies like, I mean, I think didn't Xerox create Windows? Like they had Windows and they actually sold it to, then they just kind of gave it away. They actually created all these tech and these companies that just created something else that wasn't, because it was like, they're kind of just going in that direction and it's like a huge juggernaut. And it's difficult. It's very difficult when you're that big. And we've work with corporates. God, trying to get them to do anything different is so
it's literally
hard.
An oil tanker, isn't it? When you're going on the oil tanker and you see the big ships, it's like, right, it takes 9 minutes, from going full speed ahead to going to stop. It takes 9 minutes, 57 seconds. And it's so hard to get them to change course. Whereas when you're in a smaller e-commerce business, you can go so fast, especially if you're a founder-led business and you've got that drive of being the founder. You are able to be with the customers where they are emotionally, and you can steer this go-kart in comparison.
What's fascinating is that these corporates get to that level despite that friction. In that the arbitrage of their business models must have been so amazing to get that big. Like look, someone like Google, like the arbitrage of Google of what it was doing to get that big whilst it became a corporate. Only those kind of business models that can just go through the erosion of that speed and agility and get really, really big. It's fascinating, isn't it, if you think about it? Because like most small business models, when they lose that agility, those businesses basically die because they can't change quick enough. Like you can't say, like, if you have any, you're selling something and you found something works in the market, you can't take that to 10 billion because someone will come along and eat your lunch. And so it's the scalability of the business really depends on kind of like the ability for you to keep that arbitrage all the way to the top.
Google's size is its protective moat. That is a business that needs to be huge in order to protect itself because of the volume of search. Just take one of its products, it's Google Search. If it doesn't have a huge, significant amount of the market share, nothing works because there's no people there. There's no one doing enough searches, so all of their models just fall apart. So its only way to survive is to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that is their protection, isn't it?
That's called the network effect, isn't it? It's like Facebook, the network effect. Like if everybody's on Facebook, everybody wants to be on Facebook because everybody's there. Like if all your friends are on Facebook, you're going to be on Facebook. You're not going to be on Mark Hammersley's networking site.com because there's only like 2 of you there. Like it's just not. It's not there. Like same with like all the social media things. They only work if they get big, and So there can only be a few of them because you can't be on everything. And every once in a while, something new like TikTok comes along, everybody jumps on it, and everybody's like, "Oh, everybody's on TikTok." So now we can we can do that as well. So you've got that critical mass, haven't you? Yeah. And then so what I'm going to do, Ian, is because I think there's enough in the second half for the next podcast next week, and then we don't have to come up with an idea for next week. And so next week, what I want to cover is what types of team members you could use by hiring like VAs in the Philippines or similar countries, what roles you can't do, which ones you can do, what you would kind of pay for those kind of people, a recruitment and hiring process, and how to actually find people and what to go through, and then also how to manage people like remote and internal teams, and go through maybe some tools that we use and talk about some of those things, because I think that if we try and I think we can't go through it in the next 10 minutes, so we'll do that next week.
No problem.
Yeah, so that'd be awesome. Thank you very much. Cheers, guys.
Cheerio. Thanks, everyone. Bye.